The hum of twin plasma blades screamed through the air, carving nothing but empty space. Xyler, Empress-elect of the Varnoth hegemony, stumbled forward. Before she could correct her stance, a sharp, unyielding crack of polished oak snapped against her tertiary wrist. The plasma hilt clattered to the deck. Numbness flared up her arm. She blinked, 4 eyes wide with sudden, terrifying clarity. Standing opposite her wasn't a heavily armored warlord. It was a gray-haired human in a faded jacket, holding a scarred wooden stick, and he wasn't even breathing hard. It turned out, in an arena defined by plasma and impenetrable armor, the deadliest weapon proved to be human adaptability. Just 2 hours earlier, the Aegis Nexus station had been a suffocating cage of diplomacy. The air processors hummed with recycled oxygen, carrying the faint, sterile scent of a dozen different species, all too polite, all too soft. Xyler's combat-starved instincts had been clawing at the inside of her skull. She needed the rhythm of a fight. She needed an opponent who wouldn't immediately bow. Instead, she found Elias Rance. He was sitting at a quiet corner table near the primary airlock, nursing a cup of synthetic tea. Humans. They called humanity weak and short-lived, brittle creatures who relied on numbers rather than individual strength. Xyler had watched him for a long time. He moved slowly, favoring his left leg. His eyes looked hollow. To an apex predator born with 4 arms and a genetic mandate to conquer, he looked entirely inconsequential. So, she had approached his table, slamming her heavy gauntlet onto the metal surface. She challenged him publicly, her voice echoing across the promenade, demanding a sparring match to entertain her. She openly dismissed his species as fragile, demanding he prove otherwise. She expected him to cower. She expected an apology. Truth is, she expected a lot of things. She didn't expect him to take a slow sip of his tea, sigh deeply, and stand up. Now, under the harsh, artificial lights of the station's combat ring, the reality of her mistake was setting in. A battle meant to humiliate a lesser species was rapidly becoming a masterclass in survival and restraint. Xyler had entered the ring radiating heat and arrogance, igniting her dual blades. The sharp scent of ozone from superheated air filled the enclosed space. She was a hurricane of violet scales, muscle, and lethal precision, but Elias hadn't drawn a blaster. He hadn't requested a kinetic shield. He had calmly walked onto the sparring mat carrying a wooden practice staff. A legendary alien conqueror meets her match, in a retired human wielding nothing but a wooden stick. She lunged again, bringing her remaining plasma blade down in a sweeping arc that would have cleaved a heavy assault drone in two. Elias simply wasn't there. He pivoted, stepping inside her guard with an impossible fluid grace. The wooden staff blurred. It didn't strike to break bones. It struck to disable. A sharp, localized jab to the nerve cluster behind her knee sent her buckling. A sweeping parry redirected her own forward momentum, throwing her violently off balance. Every strike she offered was met not with opposing force, but with a shifting, empty space that used her massive strength against her. She growled, a deep, frustrated vibration in her chest, and swung wild. He ducked under the humming arc of energy, the heat singeing the ends of his gray hair, and brought the blunt end of the staff up against her sternum. It was a measured, painfully precise impact, not enough to crush her ribcage, but exactly enough to force the air from her lungs in a sharp, stunned gasp. Xyler choked on recycled air. The strike wasn't meant to shatter her ribs, but the blunt force of it commanded absolute respect. Her pride, hot and stubborn, flared one last desperate time. She lunged forward with a furious hiss, her lower left arm hooking outward to tear the wooden staff from his grip. Elias didn't fight her momentum. He let the staff slide through his fingers, caught her thick wrist with his bare hand. The grip felt like titanium wire pulled taut beneath warm skin and pivoted his hips. The station spun. The deck plating rushed up to meet her spine with a bone-jarring crash. Before her secondary lungs could draw breath, the polished tip of the oak staff rested gently, immovably, against the soft, unarmored scales of her throat. He stared down at her. No anger, no bloodlust. Just the weary, terrifying calm of a man who had survived 100 wars and wanted no part of another. A collective intake of breath rippled through the gathered crowd of diplomats and armored guards. Someone in the back, a pale-faced Varnoth Atasha, whispered a name that carried over the hum of the air processors. The ghost, by the stars, that's the ghost of Kepler. The words hit Xyler harder than the deck had. The Kepler siege. The mythic human phantom who had bypassed a Class IV planetary blockade, dismantled a warlord's flagship from the inside, and vanished into the void, leaving the crew alive, but the vessel completely dead. Her military academies taught that raid as a theoretical impossibility. They said he was a wraith. They never said he was an aging man with a pronounced limp. Truth is, she had been blind. Underestimating an opponent based on superficial traits or biological assumptions often leads to devastating miscalculations. She had looked at his lack of heavy armor, his gray hair, and seen fragility. She entirely missed the lethal efficiency forged in decades of brutal survival. Elias slowly pulled the staff back. He didn't gloat. He didn't demand her public submission. He simply rested his weapon against his shoulder and offered her a calloused, heavily scarred hand. She stared at his outstretched palm. For a Varnoth commander, a fallen warrior was expected to bleed out or beg, but true strength is measured not by the capacity for absolute destruction, but by the restraint to teach and show mercy. This fragile, short-lived human possessed a terrifying abundance of both. Xyler reached up with two of her hands, grasping his forearm. He hauled her massive, armored frame upright with a sharp grunt. The sheer density of her muscle mass made it a struggle, his boot sliding slightly on the metal floor, but he didn't let go until she was firmly on her feet. The arena held its breath. The spectators waited for the Empress-elect to erupt, to order her dreadnoughts to level the station for this humiliation. Instead, she deactivated her fallen plasma blade with a flick of her wrist. The violent violet light died. She stepped back and bowed. It was a deep, highly formal dip of her head, exposing the vulnerable nape of her neck to a foreign victor. "I sought a victim," Xyler said, her voice rough, the translation matrix catching the deep rumble in her chest. "I found a master." Elias rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly looking intensely uncomfortable with the reverent quiet in the room. "Just a guy trying to finish his tea, Your Highness." She straightened, all four eyes locking onto his. The arrogance that had fueled her conquests for a century was gone, burned away by the sharp friction of reality. Humility is the foundation of true mastery. Even undefeated experts must remain open to learning from unexpected sources. She had learned more in 3 minutes with a piece of wood than in a decade of plasma duels. "The Varnoth hegemony does not ally with the soft," she announced, her voice carrying across the promenade. "Which is why, Elias Vance, I will not leave this station until our people are bound by a permanent treaty. Teach us how to survive." Elias let out a long, quiet sigh. A small, genuine smile finally cracked the exhaustion in his face. "Only if you let me finish my drink first."